just to build upon what you just said, the worst thing that can happen, and I've seen this, I've studied many reforms in OECD countries, public sector reforms, the worst thing that can happen is that it is monopolized by civil servants and some politicians. It should actually be part of a societal debate, and there should be ownership within society. And I'm very pleased today that I'm seeing here in Romania this societal debate emerging, and so I should congratulate you for that purpose. Having said that, I think what I observe and what I'm going to say, I'm going to make 3 points on the need to reform, and actually making the point that the reform strategies from the past will not fit for the future. And so I will suggest 3 amendments or paradigm change even for future reform strategies within the European Union and therefore also hopefully for Romania. The first thing is, the first paradigm change is that we used to work with a model to say we have standard operating procedures, we have normality, we deliver services, and then there's a crisis. Then we try to solve the crisis or contain the crisis or manage the crisis, and then we go back to normal. Some call it then new normal, but certainly to normal and standard operating procedures, and then there comes a new crisis. So it's a sequential thinking. I think we will have to change our public sphere, including our public sector, not to a sequential thinking, but to a simultaneous thinking. So we will have to reorganize the public sector and the public sphere, where simultaneously we deliver services and we have chronicle crisis governance, crisis in plural. And we have had the pandemic as an example of that, because it creates not just a crisis, it's turbulence, it's a system shake. And by handling the system shake, we still have to ensure service delivery and the operations of the state. So that's the first paradigm change which we will have to do. And that will be a challenge to see how we reorganize the public sector sensu lato. The second thing is about trust, because I want to refer to the title of our day, innovation and trust. The legitimacy of the state becomes, and it has been said by many speakers, becomes a crucial thing. And the trustworthiness, how to rethink the trustworthiness of our state. And it's based on initially 2 things, but there's a third issue that we have to add. The first one is, of course, the rule of law. Monsieur Attali has clearly said it. The rule of law, it's a bit sad that even in Europe, we have to emphasize that it's still important and that we have to watch it in a very careful way. We have to ensure that. The second thing is democratic decision-making. That includes elections, but it's not just elections, it's actually the whole cycle of decision-making, and we have to make it in a more democratic way, which means we have to include citizens in a participatory and a collaborative way, also during decisions making before design, implementation, evaluation, the whole policy cycle. That's the second thing. We have to reinvent our democracies from that point of view in the decision-making sense. The third thing is actually referring to my first point. It's about service delivery, but with inclusion, so inclusive service delivery. I think that's a crucial element because we have been pushed by neoliberal systems to have exclusive service deliveries. Inclusion is a crucial element to avoid polarization, and the sense of exclusion is huge. We have to make sure it is the delivery is there. It should be combined with this recurrent chronicle crisis governance. And citizens should have the impression and evidence that the public sector is part of the solution here, and that we are part of the solution to govern and handle crisis. And the third element, it's the innovation issue. Because we will need innovation to reinvent the service delivery and to make sure we can handle the crisis, the chronic crisis governance. We will need innovation. And innovation, it is not, let me make some qualifications from what has been said this morning. It's not just digital innovation. Of course, it's also digital innovation. But we also need social innovation. We will have to reinvent social innovation, how to involve citizens in the whole policy cycle, in the delivery, as volunteers. It's NGOs who should be involved too. Also the private sector obviously too. So these are elements which we have to take into account that's the second part which I wanted to make as a point. The third point, it's a shift too, a shift from the past. The question is, what is the main driver of our society here and of the state? Because since COVID, we know that the state is back. It has been mentioned, the state is back. And so we come from an era, and my good friend and colleague Jean-Michel mentioned it too, the neoliberal obsession that we have to create a market state seems not to work too well when we have to run the combination of effective and inclusive service delivery combined with crisis governance. It seems not to work too well. So the state has to take back control to say, now of course we need a market, don't misunderstand me. But my point is that new public management, the new public management era is over. And we have to take the best parts for the market functions in our societies here. We also see that networks were mentioned several times. I think most of us are in favor of networks. But there are bad networks too, but we're talking about the functional networks. There are digital networks, there are social networks. But ultimately, if we only have networks, it will not function. We will not be able to combine the service delivery and the crisis governance. Networks are necessary but not sufficient. Markets are necessary but not sufficient. And that brings us to hierarchy, the public hierarchies, which is the state and the public sector. I think there we have to make sure, because it's part of the solution, that it functions properly. And my proposal here, and I have been developing this with my friend, the late Christopher Pollitt, is the neo-Weberian state. The neo-Weberian state, and Max Weber was mentioned, should be installed. It's reinventing the rule of law combined with democracy. It's about horizontal collaboration, the three sectors, public, not-for-profit, private, the vertical collaboration, the different levels of government, and many of these things you mentioned here during these days. It's about rebuilding trust, because it's not just trust of society in the public sector, it's also trust of the public sector in society to be able to do what it has to do. And it's also trust within the public sector. Trust within the public sector, for example, trusting central government, trusting local governments, but also giving them the capacity to do a proper job, which means people and personnel and competences. So for me, it was mentioned too, the keynote speech by Mr. Ioana is very clear. He said certainly, bottom up, local governments are crucial, not just top down. And I think there I would like to stop. So I combine not from sequential to recurrent, make sure the trustworthiness is reinvented by focusing on delivery and crisis governance to innovation. And the third is we need strong hierarchies, the state, in combination with the market and the networks. But the state should be able to regulate the digital and regulate the social. It was in the previous panel. Some people don't like regulation. Well, it seems self-regulation doesn't work too well. And so I think if we want a democratic and rule of law-based regulation, we have to look at a democratic and rule of law based state. Thank you.